Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. In the heart of a small, quiet town where neighbors trusted each other and nights were calm, one evening changed everything. At exactly 10:15 p.m., a young woman vanished without a trace. Her car was found still running, her belongings untouched, but she was gone. What began as a puzzling disappearance soon unraveled into a chilling crime that would shock the entire community, leaving scars that would never fade. This is the story of the Vanishing Hour. The town of Fairview was small and peaceful. Life moved slowly there, and nothing truly serious ever seemed to happen. People left their doors unlocked, children played outside until dark, and neighbors always greeted each other with a smile. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and strangers stood out quickly. But all of that changed one cold night in November. Claire Matthews was 26 years old. She was a kind and hard-working woman who lived alone in a small apartment not far from the town center. She worked at a local bookstore, and most people in Fairview knew her face. She was friendly, polite, and never caused any trouble. On the night of November 14th, she closed the store a little later than usual. She stacked the last pile of books, locked the door, and walked toward the parking lot. The time was 10:15 p.m. Claire's car, a silver sedan, was parked under a streetlight. The lot was quiet and only a few cars remained. The air was crisp, and her footsteps echoed softly as she walked. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck and carried her purse close to her side. At first, it was just another ordinary evening, but within minutes, everything would turn strange. Later, investigators would piece together what happened next. A nearby security camera from a small cafe captured a blurry figure walking behind Claire at a distance. At the time, no one noticed. The figure never came close enough to be identified, but it was there, moving slowly in the shadows. When Claire reached her car, something unusual must have happened. The engine of the sedan was later found running, the keys still in the ignition. Her purse was inside, resting on the passenger seat, untouched. The driver's side door was slightly open, but Claire was gone. At first, no one noticed her absence. People assumed she had gone home as usual. But the next morning, her manager grew worried when she didn't show up for her shift at the bookstore. Claire was always punctual. She never missed work without calling ahead. Phone calls went unanswered, and her friends could not reach her. Her mother, who lived in the next town over, reported her missing by the afternoon. Police officers went straight to the bookstore and the parking lot. That was when they discovered her car. The sight was disturbing. The vehicle looked like it had been left in a hurry. The engine was cold now, but everything else suggested Claire had been about to drive away. Yet she had simply disappeared. The news spread quickly through Fairview. Word of mouth traveled faster than anything else in the small community. Neighbors whispered to each other about what could have happened. Some believed she had run away. Others thought it was a robbery gone wrong. But the strange detail, that nothing had been taken, only deepened the mystery. Detectives examined the area. They found faint footprints leading away from the car toward a dark alley at the edge of the lot. The prints were unclear, smudged by the damp ground, but they didn't belong to Claire. That much was certain. It looked like someone else had been there that night. By evening, volunteers from the community joined the search. People carried flashlights and walked through fields, wooded trails, and abandoned lots. Police set up roadblocks at the town's exits and questioned anyone who might have seen something, but no one had answers. It was as if Claire had been swallowed by the night. Her family pleaded with the public for help. Her mother stood before cameras, her voice shaking as she begged anyone with information to come forward. "My daughter is kind. She wouldn't just leave. Please, if you know anything, say something." The case became the center of attention in Fairview. Reporters from nearby cities came to cover the story. For a town that rarely made the news, this disappearance brought sudden and unwanted spotlight. People who once felt safe walking alone at night now locked their doors early and looked over their shoulders. Parents told their children not to wander too far. A sense of fear crept into every corner of Fairview. Detectives worked around the clock. They interviewed Claire's co-workers. One of them remembered seeing a man standing near the bookstore the week before. He had no reason to be there and didn't buy anything, but he stayed outside for nearly half an hour before leaving. His description was vague: tall, dark jacket, and a cap pulled low over his face. It was not much, but it was the first clue that pointed toward something more sinister than a random accident. Meanwhile, investigators pulled security footage from every business near the parking lot. Most cameras offered poor quality, grainy images, and many were not working that night. But one recording from the cafe showed that same shadowy figure trailing Claire just minutes before she disappeared. The face was hidden, but the posture and movement were clear. Someone had been following her. Still, without more evidence, detectives could not identify the suspect. All they had was an outline of a figure moving in the dark. As night fell again on Fairview, the search continued. Officers carried out a sweep through nearby woods while neighbors lit candles outside their homes in silent support. Everyone hoped Claire would be found alive. But deep down, an uneasy feeling settled in. Something terrible had happened during that vanishing hour, and the town would never be the same again. The morning after Claire's car was found, the police declared her disappearance an urgent case. Time was critical, and every passing hour made her safe return less likely. Officers sealed off the bookstore parking lot with yellow tape and began a careful search of the area. Detectives spoke with anyone who had been nearby the previous night, but answers were few. Most people had gone home before Claire locked up the shop. Those who remained saw nothing unusual. By midday, the whole town knew. Flyers with Claire's photo were printed and handed out. Missing Claire Matthews. Last seen on November 14th around 10:15 p.m. The posters were taped to street lamps, shop windows, and notice boards. Her smile stared back at the town from every corner. It was a haunting reminder of how quickly someone could vanish. The police organized a search party. Dozens of volunteers gathered at the town hall, armed with flashlights, boots, and warm jackets. The sheriff, a steady man named Richard Cole, gave simple instructions. We will divide into groups. Search every trail, every abandoned lot, every barn. Look for anything out of place, clothing, footprints, broken branches. Report back immediately if you find something. The group spread out, combing through the outskirts of Fairview. They walked in straight lines through open fields, swept the wooded areas, and checked old sheds. Dogs were brought in to follow Claire's scent, but the trail ended not far from the parking lot, as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. The search dragged into the night. Families carried lanterns, calling her name through the darkness. Claire! Claire, can you hear us? But there was no reply. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves and the distant barking of dogs. At the bookstore, detectives looked for clues inside. Everything seemed normal. Cash register locked, shelves in order, lights switched off properly. Claire had finished her shift as she always did. There was no sign of a struggle inside. The only evidence remained outside: the running car, the open door, and the shadow on the cafe footage. Meanwhile, Claire's family gathered at her apartment. Her mother clutched a framed photo of her daughter and wept quietly. Friends sat together, whispering in disbelief. She would never just leave, one said. Claire wasn't like that. Something happened to her. The case quickly drew media attention. News vans parked on Main Street, cameras flashing as reporters described Fairview as a once quiet town now gripped by fear. Journalists interviewed locals who spoke of their shock and confusion. The small community, unused to attention, suddenly felt like they were living in the middle of a nightmare. Rumors began to spread. Some claimed they had seen a strange van near the bookstore in the past week. Others whispered about a man who had been asking questions about Claire around town. None of these stories were confirmed, but each one fed the growing tension. Parents began to pick up their children from school instead of letting them walk home. Shopkeepers closed early. Streets that were once lively in the evenings grew empty as night fell. Back at the police station, Detective Sarah Morgan studied the blurry footage of the figure following Claire. She replayed it again and again, searching for details. The suspect's face was hidden, but his walk was unusual, slightly uneven, like a limp or a heavy step. She wrote it down, hoping it might help later. That evening, the sheriff held a press conference. He stood in front of the courthouse, his face grave. "We are doing everything in our power to bring Claire Matthews home. We urge anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward." If you saw or heard anything unusual on the night of November 14th, please contact us immediately. The townspeople listened closely. For many, this was the first time they realized the danger might be close. Someone in their own community could be responsible. The thought unsettled everyone. As the search continued, officers questioned Claire's co-workers again. One remembered a man who had come into the store a week earlier. He asked for a rare book, but his questions seemed strange and his eyes lingered on Claire too long. He left without buying anything. The co-worker described him as tall, with dark hair and a heavy jacket. It wasn't much, but it gave detectives another lead. The search teams returned late that night, tired and discouraged. They had found nothing. No clothing, no signs of a struggle, no footprints that led anywhere. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. But then, just before midnight, a farmer reported something unusual. While checking his property near the edge of town, he found a piece of fabric caught on a barbed wire fence. It looked like a scarf. The police collected it and showed it to Claire's mother the next morning. She broke down in tears. It was Claire's favorite scarf. The scarf was sent to the lab for testing. Detectives hoped it would hold some clue, perhaps DNA, blood, or traces of where she had been taken. The discovery reignited the search, but it also confirmed the community's worst fears. Claire had not left by choice. Something darker was unfolding in Fairview. That night, as the townspeople locked their doors and double-checked their windows, a sense of unease grew heavier. For generations, Fairview had been safe, untouched by big city crimes. But now, one of their own had vanished, leaving behind nothing but questions and fear. The town waited anxiously for answers, unaware that the real story of the vanishing hour was only just beginning. Detectives worked late into the night, studying every detail of the case. The discovery of Claire's scarf gave them hope, but it also raised new questions. How did it end up on the farmer's fence? Did she run and drop it while escaping, or was it placed there to mislead them? Sheriff Cole pressed his team to focus. We cannot afford mistakes. Every clue matters. Look again, check again. Someone out there knows what happened. The next morning, the police expanded their investigation. Officers returned to the area near the fence where the scarf had been found. They searched the ground for footprints, tire tracks, anything. The soil was damp from rain, but they managed to find partial impressions. A boot print, larger than Claire's foot, heading toward the woods. That print was carefully photographed and preserved. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Morgan returned to the bookstore parking lot. She retraced Claire's steps from the store's back door to the car. She imagined what Claire saw, what she heard. The cafe's camera had captured the shadowy figure, but the footage was poor. Still, Sarah noticed something. The figure's posture matched the boot print found near the scarf. Heavy stride, broad shoulders, and that strange, uneven walk. The pieces began to connect. But the suspect's identity remained hidden. Back at the police station, detectives called in Claire's co-workers again for more interviews. One of them, a young man named Peter, recalled something strange. On the night of her disappearance, he saw a man leaning against a lamppost near the store as he left for home. At the time, he thought little of it. Now, after seeing the news, he believed it might be important. He described the man, tall, wearing a dark jacket and a cap pulled low. His face was shadowed, but his presence was unsettling. Detectives entered the description into their database. Several names came up, men with past criminal records who matched the general look. One name stood out, Daniel Harker. He had a history of trespassing and stalking women in nearby towns. He had been arrested twice but never served long sentences. The records showed he had recently been spotted near Fairview. Sheriff Cole ordered surveillance on Daniel's known hangouts. Officers drove by his last listed address, but the house appeared empty. Neighbors said he came and went at odd hours, never staying long. One neighbor admitted she often saw him walking late at night, sometimes muttering to himself. As police dug deeper, more unsettling details surfaced. A cashier at a local gas station remembered seeing Daniel days earlier. He bought coffee and stood by the window, staring across the street at the bookstore. When asked if he needed help, he ignored her and left. The evidence was growing, but it was still not enough for an arrest. Sheriff Cole warned his team, "We need to be careful. Suspicion is not proof. If we move too fast, we risk losing him. Meanwhile, the town of Fairview was on edge. Fear spread quickly. Parents no longer allowed their children to walk to school. The streets emptied after dark. Local businesses reported fewer customers, especially at night. People looked at each other differently, wondering if the suspect might be someone they passed every day. Claire's family suffered the most. Her mother refused to leave the house, waiting by the phone for news. Her brother, Mark, joined the search teams daily, walking miles of forest trails in the hope of finding his sister. Friends gathered nightly at the church to pray for her safe return. Detectives began checking phone records and bank activity. Claire's accounts had not been touched since the night she disappeared. No calls, no purchases, nothing. It was as if she had been cut off from the world completely. Forensic results finally arrived for the scarf. Blood was detected, though only a small amount. DNA confirmed it belonged to Claire. That discovery pushed investigators closer to treating the case not just as a disappearance, but as a violent crime. Detective Morgan pushed to question Daniel Harker directly. With the sheriff's approval, they tracked him down at a run-down motel on the edge of the county. When officers arrived, Daniel looked startled but calm. He denied knowing Claire. "I don't even know who she is," he said, his voice flat. "I mind my own business." But inside his room, the police noticed troubling signs. On the desk was a notebook filled with scribbles. Some of the writings mentioned a woman at a bookstore, described in chilling detail. While the notebook didn't use Claire's name, the descriptions matched her. Officers also found a map of Fairview with the bookstore and parking lot circled in red ink. The evidence was disturbing, but still circumstantial. Daniel was taken in for further questioning. Under the bright light of the interrogation room, he remained cold and expressionless. He admitted he had been in Fairview, but insisted it was just passing through. When detectives pressed him about the notebook, he shrugged. "Just stories I write. They don't mean anything." Detectives left the room uneasy. Something about Daniel felt wrong. His calmness, his lack of emotion. It was as if he had no concern for the missing woman. Still, without solid proof, they could not hold him for long. The sheriff released a statement to the public, warning residents to remain cautious. "We are following leads and we ask the community to stay alert. Lock your doors. Report anything unusual." The warning only deepened the fear that had already taken hold. That night, as the town lay restless, Detective Morgan reviewed the footage once more. She zoomed in on the blurry shadow near Claire's car. The suspect's walk, the uneven stride, looked identical to the way Daniel had walked into the interrogation room. For Sarah, the connection was undeniable. Daniel Harker was their man, but proving it would be the hardest part. Fairview waited, desperate for answers, while the investigation moved into darker territory. The mystery of the vanishing hour was no longer just about a missing woman. It was about uncovering the truth before the town lost its sense of safety forever. The town of Fairview was no longer the same. What once felt like a safe and quiet place now felt tense and dangerous. Streets that used to be full of laughter in the evenings now grew silent before sunset. Doors that had always been left unlocked were bolted shut. Neighbors who once trusted each other now glanced with suspicion, wondering if someone close could be hiding a dark secret. Inside the police station, Detective Sarah Morgan sat at her desk, reviewing the evidence again. The scarf, the boot print, the cafe footage, and Daniel Harker's disturbing notebook, it all pointed toward him. But the law required more than suspicion. Without solid proof, Daniel could not be held responsible. Sheriff Richard Cole walked into the room. His face was tired, but his voice was firm. "We need to find something stronger, Sarah. We can't keep chasing shadows." "The town is losing faith in us," Sarah nodded. She felt the same frustration. "He's hiding something, Sheriff. I know it, but he's careful. He doesn't leave traces." Meanwhile, volunteers continued searching. Every day, groups walked through fields, riversides, and abandoned barns. They returned with nothing but tired faces and heavy hearts. The hope of finding Claire alive was fading, though no one wanted to admit it. Then one evening, a phone call changed everything. A young man named Kevin, who worked at a hardware store, reported something odd. A few days before Claire's disappearance, Daniel Harker had come in to buy rope, duct tape, and gloves. At the time, Kevin thought it was for farm work. Now, after seeing Daniel's face on the news, he realized it could be connected. Detectives quickly confirmed the purchase with receipts. The items themselves were not illegal, but the timing raised more suspicion. Sarah added it to the growing list of evidence. At the same time, rumors spread faster than facts. Some said Claire had been kidnapped and taken out of town. Others believed she was still alive, hidden somewhere close. Fear turned into anger. People demanded answers. Town meetings grew heated, with residents shouting at officials, blaming the police for not doing enough. Sheriff Cole stood before them, trying to calm the storm. "We are working day and night. We will not stop until we find Claire Matthews. I promise you that." His words gave some comfort, but many left the meeting unconvinced. A week after Claire's disappearance, detectives followed up on another tip. A woman who lived near the woods claimed she saw a man walking late at night. He carried a large bag slung over his shoulder. She could not see his face, but she noticed the uneven walk, the same strange stride that matched the suspect in the video. Officers searched the area she described. Hidden beneath leaves and branches, they found an old, abandoned shack. Inside, the smell was strong, damp wood mixed with something sour. On the floor lay strands of hair, long and blonde. Forensics later confirmed they belonged to Claire. The discovery shook the team. Claire had been there at least for some time. They also found duct tape and a torn piece of cloth. It was another piece of the puzzle, another link tying Daniel to the crime. Still, Daniel denied everything. When detectives confronted him with the evidence, he remained calm. "You think I had something to do with her? You're wrong. People are just making up stories because you have no one else to blame." His coldness unsettled everyone. Sarah watched him closely, studying his every word. He showed no emotion, no concern for Claire, no fear of punishment. It was as if he enjoyed the attention, as if he wanted them to chase him. Meanwhile, the town lived in fear. Parents walked their children to school, churches held nightly vigils, and businesses closed early. People no longer felt safe in their own homes. For the first time in years, Fairview felt like a place under threat. Claire's family could barely cope. Her mother refused to eat, spending her days staring out the window, waiting for news. Her brother Mark grew restless, searching the woods on his own despite warnings. "I can't sit still," he told the detectives. "I need to do something. She's my sister." The pressure on the police mounted. Media outlets painted Fairview as the town of fear. Reporters compared Claire's case to other high-profile disappearances. Headlines screamed about failure, about time running out. Detective Morgan felt the weight of it every day. Each clue they uncovered brought them closer, but the answers still remained just out of reach. Late one night, while going through the notebook again, she noticed something strange. Among the scribbles and notes about a woman at the bookstore, there was a date circled in red, the very night Claire vanished. Beneath it, 2 words, "The Hour." It sent a chill down her spine. Was this Daniel's way of naming his crime? Was the vanishing hour something he had planned? She shared it with Sheriff Cole. He leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "This isn't random. He chose her. He planned it. And he thinks he's smarter than us." The sheriff ordered round-the-clock surveillance on Daniel. Officers followed him quietly, noting where he went, who he spoke to. For days, he led an ordinary routine, buying groceries, walking through town, returning to the motel. But detectives knew better. They believed he was hiding something darker, something they had not yet found. The town held its breath, waiting for answers. Claire's disappearance had turned into a nightmare that touched every home. People wanted justice, but the truth still hid in the shadows. And as the second week passed, the name given by the detective, the Vanishing Hour, became what everyone in Fairview called it. A simple phrase that captured the fear, the mystery, and the darkness that had fallen over their quiet town. The discovery of Claire's hair inside the abandoned shack had shaken the entire investigation. It was the first undeniable proof that she had been held somewhere against her will. The evidence narrowed the case, but it also deepened the horror. The police now knew she had suffered, and the chances of finding her alive were slipping away. Detective Sarah Morgan sat with the forensic report in her hands. Her face was pale as she read the details. Strands of hair, traces of duct tape adhesive, and faint blood on the wooden floorboards. All of it belonged to Claire. Sheriff Cole stood across the table, silent for a moment before he spoke. "This isn't just a disappearance anymore. This is a crime scene. The police wasted no time. They put together a timeline of Daniel Harker's movements. Witnesses placed him near the woods on the night of Claire's disappearance. Others confirmed he had been wandering the outskirts of town, always late at night, always alone. His uneven walk, his strange behavior, and his violent past all pointed to one conclusion, but Daniel still denied everything. When detectives questioned him again, he leaned back in his chair, calm and arrogant. "You've got nothing on me. Hair? Tape? Woods? That doesn't prove I touched her. You're wasting your time." His words were smooth, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Meanwhile, the town's fear turned into anger. People began to demand action. At a town meeting, one man stood and shouted, "Why isn't he in jail yet?" Everyone knows he did it. How many more days are you going to let him walk free? The sheriff tried to calm them, reminding the community that the law required solid proof. But his words did little to quiet the crowd. The tension grew heavier when another clue surfaced. A hiker reported seeing a trail of disturbed ground deep in the woods, near an old riverbank. Officers rushed to the spot and found a shallow pit, half dug, covered with branches. Inside were scraps of duct tape and rope. The pit looked like it had been prepared for something or someone. The forensic team worked carefully, collecting everything. The sheriff stared at the pit with grim eyes. "He was planning something here," he said quietly. Or maybe he already did. Back at the station, Sarah pieced the clues together. Claire's scarf, her hair, the pit, the notebook with the date circled. It all fit into a dark plan. "He stalked her," she said to the sheriff. He studied her routine. He knew when she left work, when she parked her car. That night wasn't random. It was planned, the sheriff nodded. And now we need to make him break. We need him to admit what he's done. The detectives prepared another interrogation. This time, they confronted Daniel with the scarf, the hair, and the pit. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening on the table. For the first time, his calm mask began to crack. "You think you're clever," Detective Morgan said, her voice sharp. "But we know you followed her. We know you were in those woods. We found her hair, her blood. We found where you tried to bury something. How long do you think you can keep lying?" Daniel smirked faintly, though his eyes darted away. "You think I'm scared? You think I'll confess because you wave a scarf in my face? You've got nothing." But Sarah noticed the change. His arrogance was thinner now, his words weaker. She leaned closer. "You planned the Vanishing Hour, didn't you?" "That's what you called it. It's written in your notebook. You circled the date. You stalked her for weeks. You thought no one would catch you." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked away, refusing to answer. Silence filled the room, heavy and tense. The detectives pressed harder, but he said nothing more. Without a direct confession, the sheriff knew they still lacked the final piece. They had to keep searching. That night, officers returned to the woods with stronger equipment. They dug deeper around the riverbank, searching for hidden remains. Hours passed, but then one officer shouted. Buried under soil and leaves, they found another piece of fabric, Claire's blouse. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes. The evidence was undeniable now. Claire had been there and Daniel had lied. The blouse was rushed to the lab. Bloodstains confirmed it belonged to Claire. With this, the case grew even stronger. The next morning, the sheriff called Daniel back in. This time, the evidence was laid out on the table before him. The scarf, the blouse, the notebook, the map. One by one, each item told the story of his crime. Daniel stared at the objects, his face pale. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a low voice, he whispered, "You'll never find her." The words sent chills through the room. Sarah slammed her hand on the table. "Where is she? What did you do to her?" But Daniel only smiled faintly, a twisted look on his face. He had admitted nothing, but his words were enough to confirm their fears. Claire was gone, and Daniel was the one responsible. The sheriff stepped out of the room, his voice hard. "Prepare the warrant. We have enough to charge him." Outside, the town held its breath. News spread quickly. An arrest was near. People gathered in small groups, whispering about justice and vengeance. For many, Daniel's name had already become a curse. As the police prepared their case, one truth grew clear. The Vanishing Hour was not just about the night Claire disappeared. It was about a carefully planned crime, carried out by a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else. But the investigation was not over. The most important question remained unanswered. Where was Claire? The search would continue, and the town would not rest until the truth was uncovered. Daniel Harker sat behind bars, but the town of Fairview still felt no relief. His arrest was a major step forward, yet one question haunted everyone. Where was Claire? Without that answer, there could be no peace. Detective Sarah Morgan knew the case was far from finished. She studied the evidence late into the night, searching for a lead that could reveal Claire's final location. The scarf, the blouse, the shack, the pit by the riverbank, all told a story, but the ending was still missing. Inside the interrogation room, Daniel remained cold and stubborn. He refused to give details. Sometimes he sat in silence, staring at the wall. Other times he smiled faintly, as if enjoying the detective's frustration. Sheriff Cole leaned across the table one evening and said firmly, "You think this is a game? But it isn't. A woman's life was stolen, and we will make sure you pay." Daniel only shrugged. "Prove it." Forensics teams dug deeper into his belongings. They searched his motel room, his car, and even his storage locker. Inside the locker, they found boxes of notebooks, each filled with strange writings. Most were about women he had seen or followed. He described their daily routines, what they wore, where they went. It was clear now, Claire had not been his first obsession. One journal was different. It focused almost entirely on Claire. He wrote about watching her at the bookstore, how she smiled at customers, how she locked the door at night. The final entry chilled everyone. "Tonight is the hour. She will be mine, and no one will ever find her." Detective Morgan felt a shiver as she read the words aloud. It was the closest thing to a confession, proof that Daniel had planned everything. But still, he would not reveal where he had taken her. Meanwhile, the town remained restless. Vigils were held every night, candles burning outside the church. People prayed for Claire's return, even though many feared the worst. Parents hugged their children tighter, and the once lively streets of Fairview stayed quiet after dark. Claire's family lived in torment. Her mother's health began to weaken from stress and grief. Her brother Mark refused to give up. "I'll find her," he told the detectives. "No matter how long it takes, I'll keep looking." His determination inspired others, and more volunteers joined the search. Then came a breakthrough. A forensic technician re-examined the soil samples taken from Daniel's boots. Mixed in the mud were traces of clay and plant matter not found near the woods where the blouse was discovered. The samples matched an area farther out, near an abandoned quarry on the edge of town. Immediately, search teams moved to the quarry. The land was overgrown, the stone pits filled with rainwater and weeds. It was a lonely, forgotten place, perfect for hiding something. Officers spread out, combing through the brush, digging carefully. Hours passed with nothing, but then, near the base of an old oak tree, a detective found something. A shallow grave covered with loose dirt and leaves. The dig began slowly, carefully. As shovels cut through the earth, the truth emerged. Inside, wrapped in a torn sheet, were human remains. Jewelry on the wrist confirmed it. It was Claire Matthews. The discovery sent shock through everyone present. Even though many had feared this ending, seeing it confirmed broke their hearts. Officers bowed their heads in silence. Detective Morgan clenched her fists, fighting back tears. Sheriff Cole removed his hat and whispered, "We found her. She can go home now." The remains were taken for official identification, but there was no doubt. Claire's vanishing hour had ended in tragedy. Back at the station, Daniel was told they had found her. For the first time, his mask cracked. His smile faded and his eyes narrowed. "You weren't supposed to find her," he muttered, almost to himself. It was the closest thing to an admission he had ever given. Detectives pressed him for details, but he went silent again, retreating into the same cold arrogance as before. It no longer mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The scarf, the blouse, the journals, the grave, all of it tied back to him. News of Claire's discovery spread quickly through Fairview. The town mourned deeply. People left flowers and candles at the bookstore where she had worked. Her mother collapsed in grief, but found small comfort in knowing the search was over. At least Claire had been found. Daniel Harker was charged with murder, kidnapping, and multiple related crimes. His trial was set, and prosecutors promised to seek the maximum sentence. The sheriff assured the community that justice would be done. "He will never walk free again," he said firmly. Still, the pain in Fairview lingered. The peaceful image of their town was gone. Parents continued to lock doors. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion, and children asked questions no one wanted to answer. The case had left scars that would not heal quickly. Detective Morgan wrote her final report late at night. Her words were steady, though her heart was heavy. She detailed every step of the investigation: the night of the disappearance, the scarf, the shack, the pit, the quarry. As she closed the file, she whispered softly, "Rest now, Claire. We did not stop until we found you." The vanishing hour had ended, but its shadow would remain over Fairview forever. The trial of Daniel Harker began months later, but the memory of Claire's disappearance was still fresh in Fairview. The courthouse was packed every day, with townspeople sitting silently, waiting to hear the details of the crime that had shaken their community. Reporters filled the steps outside, cameras flashing as they delivered live updates. Inside the courtroom, Daniel appeared calm, almost smug. He wore a plain suit, his hair neatly combed as if he wanted to appear harmless. But for those who had followed the case, his cold eyes told the truth. He was not a man who felt guilt. He was a man who believed he had been clever, a man who enjoyed the game until it slipped out of his control. The prosecution presented the evidence piece by piece. The scarf found on the farmer's fence, the blouse buried near the riverbank, the shack with strands of Claire's hair, the journals where Daniel had written about his plans, and finally the shallow grave near the quarry. Each item painted a clear picture of obsession, planning, and murder. Detective Sarah Morgan was called to testify. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of every word. She described the long nights of searching, the moment they discovered Claire's remains, and the coldness Daniel showed during every interrogation. "He planned this," she said firmly. "He called it the vanishing hour. He wanted to believe no one would ever find her. But we did." The defense tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial. They claimed the notebooks were just fantasy writing, that the scarf and blouse could have been planted, and that no one saw Daniel commit the crime directly. But their words sounded weak against the mountain of proof. Claire's family sat in the front row, holding hands tightly. Her mother often closed her eyes when the evidence was shown, unable to bear the details, while her brother Mark kept his gaze fixed on Daniel, his jaw tight with anger. For them, this trial was not only about justice, it was about closure. After weeks of testimony, the jury left to decide. Hours felt like days as the town waited for the verdict. When the jurors finally returned, the room grew silent. The foreman stood and spoke the words that everyone had hoped for. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Harker, guilty on all charges." Gasps filled the courtroom, followed by quiet tears. Daniel sat still, his expression blank. He showed no anger, no fear, no remorse. It was as if he had expected this ending, or perhaps as if he didn't care. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "Your actions were cruel, calculated, and devastating," the judge said firmly. "You took a life and shattered a community. You will spend the rest of your days behind bars." Outside the courthouse, the people of Fairview gathered. Some wept, others cheered, but all of them felt a sense of release. For the first time since that November night, there was an answer. Justice had been delivered, but the scars of the case remained. Parents still warned their children to be careful. Shopkeepers still locked their doors earlier than before. And when night fell, the streets of Fairview carried a quiet tension that never existed in the past. The town had learned the hard truth, that evil could hide even in the calmest places. At the bookstore where Claire once worked, friends and neighbors created a small memorial. Photos of her were placed on the front window, surrounded by candles and flowers. Notes from strangers read, "You will not be forgotten, and rest in peace, Claire." The bookstore owner promised to keep a shelf in her memory, filled with her favorite novels. Detective Morgan visited the memorial one evening after the trial. She stood silently, looking at the flickering candles. She thought of the long nights of searching, the frustration of dead ends, and the final moment when they uncovered Claire's resting place. "We brought you home," she whispered softly. It wasn't enough, but we didn't give up. Sheriff Cole, too, carried the weight of the case. At the next town meeting, he spoke to the people of Fairview. "This tragedy changed us all," he said. "But we stood together. We searched, we fought for the truth, and we delivered justice. Claire Matthews will always be remembered, and her story will remind us to stay vigilant, to protect one another." The people nodded, their faces solemn. They knew the sheriff was right. Fairview would never return to the quiet innocence it once had. The Vanishing Hour had left its mark forever. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to routine, though it was never quite the same. Children still played, but parents watched more closely. Shops reopened at regular hours, but locks were checked twice. The community carried on, but the memory of Claire's disappearance lingered in every corner. For Claire's family, the pain never truly faded. But they found comfort in knowing the truth had come out and justice had been served. Mark often visited the woods where her remains were found, placing flowers by the oak tree. "You're not forgotten," he whispered each time. And so, the story of the Vanishing Hour came to an end. A story of fear, of loss, of a community shaken to its core, but also a story of determination, of justice, and of the truth finally uncovered. Fairview would never be the same, but it would never forget. It's waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe to Crime Loom.